Howdy and welcome to my virtual studio. Today we're looking at Clarinet Etude number 36, measures 15 to 20. Let's go ahead and play it. Eighth note equals 102 on my metronome. First things first, as you are looking through these new segments and these new sections, we want to see if there's anything that is either consistent with what you already had or anything that's different. So in measure 15, we see some consistencies. We see those grace notes with the accents on the third eighth note and the sixth eighth note. The difference is that we are not slurring into the next big beat. So we're not slurring into B and into the B of the next measure. So we want to make sure that we are clearly marking those and maybe write a little T above the B on beat 2 of 15 and the B on beat 1 of 16, just to remind yourself to articulate those. In measure 16, it's that same B from earlier. Since we have this F next, we don't want to flip-flop those fingers. That is similar to what you had in measure 4. So we want to be really consistent with the finger patterns that we're using, but as we're comparing consistencies and differences, one thing you'll notice that's different is the articulation pattern. You're still slurring into that G. That's another one of the errata, so make sure to fix that and mark it. But everything else is just lightly tongued. It's not a slur with a staccato marking, so we don't have to use a firmer tongue while we're on it, just a light tongue as you are descending those notes into measure 17. In measure 17, we're going from this C to this G. Make sure that you have a nice firm grasp on the instrument with your hands and with your embouchure. Otherwise, it's really easy to squeak that low G, especially if you're moving your hands and your arms like a chicken. Try to keep everything as still as you can. Otherwise, you may squeak there. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. Continuing in that measure, you'll see some of the differences that we had in measure 15. So we still have those grace notes, but we're articulating the C's this time, going into beat 2 and beat 1 of the next measure. So write a T over it and circle the accents. That way we can capitalize those notes and keep that consistent with what we already had. In the next measure, measure 18, that first C is staccato, so we want to use that stop tongue, but we also want to sneak in a breath before G and take a nice good breath there, because you're not going to get a chance to for a couple more measures. In measure 18, you'll see that it's a pretty common measure that you had already. You had some of these patterns like in measure 2, like in measure 14, so it's pretty repetitive, but you'll notice that each time that you had it is different. So if you look at measure 2, and like I said, then 14 and then 18, even though the notes are the same and you have the trills, the articulation pattern is different every single time. That's another one of those gotchas, right? So you don't want the judge to be waiting to mark that as they listen to you. You want to make it clear. And in doing so, we are slurring into the A, but there is no slur in the rest of those sextuplet 16th notes. So we want to lightly tongue those going into F sharp in measure 19. So we want to make sure that we're just clearly and lightly tonguing those. Once you get to measure 19, you'll have more grace notes and some of those accents like you had before, but there's a weird note combination that you have. So it's telling you in the grace notes to play B and then A going to F sharp, and to save time and effort and just to increase the amount of dexterity that you have, what I'm doing for B is just regular A plus the very top side key by itself. Make sure that you're not bumping the 2, it's just the top one. So you'll notice it doesn't sound as good as the other B, but since it is a grace note and it's much shorter, then it'll actually end up sounding better due to the technique, because you're not going to play this note for more than a very, very, very short amount of time. Right, so it's saving you not only effort, but it is making the passage sound better. Just don't use this B if you're playing like a whole note in band. It's not going to sound good when you're playing with others or in an ensemble setting. But if it's a quick passage and you're playing with no accompaniment whatsoever, like in these etudes, then that would be the B to use. And I highly suggest that you write that fingering in, maybe at the top of your page, like alternate or side B, and have that marked. That way, if you forget it, you can always check. But it is just the regular A key plus the top side key. And that will make it sound a lot more clear. This is the second time. Just remember, measure 18 is different from 14 and different from 2 in terms of dynamics and articulation. And that is clarinet etude number 36, measures 15 through 20.